All right, so, oh, I didn't bring my slides. No, I didn't. Okay, you ready for me? All right, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Mark Baggett, and I am here to tell you about the Hacker's Apprentice. What is the Hacker's Apprentice? Well, it's an escape room that I built in my house. So it uses Python and some Internet of Things and some automation to do some things. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. So first about me, the obligatory bio slide. I'm an instructor for SANS. I'm the author of SANS Automation of Information Security with Python course. I got my GSE and as a CISO. My name appears in the Metasploit source code 7 times, but I didn't write any of those modules. It's just as the information security community is so awesome, people have given me credit for some TTPs and things like that I came up with at different conferences and things like that. So I'm here to tell you about the Hacker's Apprentice. The Hacker's Apprentice is an escape room that I have in my house. I put it together in about 5 hours. And at this point, I've had 30 different teams of people go through and do this escape room in my house. It's probably about 150 people or so have come through and done this. I've started getting requests from people. Like people are going through training on Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia. Like, hey, can we come to your house and do the escape room? And I've had classes of 40 people show up to go through, which makes my wife extremely happy. She loves the escape room that we have in our house, but really she can't complain about it too much because this is her fault. Okay. It's also Ed Scotus's fault, right? Ed Scotus is the root of all evil, right? He's done this Internet of Things talk at DerbyCon 2016 and 2017. It was all about automation, right? Ed built this Jarvis thing in his house, and then he went in further talks in 2017, and I came to this talks, and I was like, you know, I should really be spending some more time looking at this Internet of Things and playing with these things because it just looks like fun. And so I went home and I started reading about this thing called Home Assistant, which is largely what I'm going to be telling you about today. Reading about Home Assistant and all the cool things you could do with it. And then my wife comes up to me and she says, Mark, we're going to have people over at the house on Friday. This is on Wednesday. We're going to have people over at the house on Wednesday. And I want you to put together some type of a game or something that we can do while they're here. And I'm like, okay, but I really wanted to learn this Internet of Things thing. Escape room in the house, right? So I spent the next 2 days building this escape room, putting things together, and this is going to be my lessons learned from that. So Home Assistant is really the glue that ties everything together in my house. It is built to allow you to take all kinds of Internet of Things components, and we'll take a look at some of the things that they've got on there, and allows you to tie them together. Here's kind of some overviews of the architecture of this thing. Really what makes up Home Assistant is you've got these components. Components are things like lights in your house, like thermostats, switches, that you have light switches and things like that in your house. Let's see, what else have you got? Any type of networking equipment, things like that. I was amazed at the things that it will find and discover as components in the house. And all the components talk to this event bus. So you've got the event bus. They will all report their current status. So if a switch is on, it tells the event bus I'm on. If you go and turn off the switch, it tells the event bus, hey, somebody just turned me off, right? And everybody's reporting their status. Their status changes back to this event bus. And you have other things that can feed different events on. So you can trigger things yourself that will be fed to the event bus. And everybody's monitoring the event bus, and they're all reporting to the event bus. And then you can write scripts that tell things like, hey, light switch, when you see, or light bulbs, when you see light switch get changed, then you do this action and perform this type of thing. Okay, so it's really a free open source project. It's all written in Python. You can just git clone, download this thing, run one command, and it's running on a Raspberry Pi. There's actually Raspberry Pi distributions of it. There's Docker installations of this thing. So it's extremely easy to install. You see over here, it comes with a built-in web interface. So when you run it, you can just hit this web page. It's got a mobile application that you can install and control the different devices within your house. One of the goals, and as a security nerd, one of the things that I really like is its goal is to localize everything on your machine in your house. So if you've done anything with any kind of smart home stuff, there's a lot of services on the internet like If This Then That, and all these other things that you can use to tie together. There's all these cloud-based services, and they really want to focus on running a local server in your house and having all of the communications, or as much of the communications as they possibly can, inside the boundary of your home, and not have it go out to the internet. As a matter of fact, they've even they stand up their own cloud-based services, and they provide you with source code so you could stand up your own cloud-based service, which will act as a proxy. So you can stand up this little instance of a Home Assistant proxy, if you will, that's running on the internet, and things talk to it, and then it'll come in through one open port talking directly to that Home Assistant, or you can have it pull from that service, so you don't have to have any open ports on your firewall. So they really are thinking about localizing services, and even though it's developers that are putting this together, they've done a really good job when it comes to focusing on security. So when you first run Home Assistant, it scans your network, it listens for plug-and-play broadcasts on the network, and it tries to figure out what things you've got on your network as far as Internet of Things or smart devices on your home network. And some of the things I was expecting this to find, right? So, if I have Apple TVs, if I have smart light bulbs, smart switches or thermostats or cameras, I was anticipating it's going to find those things and configure them. And sure enough, it did. But there were several other things that when I ran Home Assistant, it found inside my house that I really hadn't thought about as a nerd. I'm a little ashamed to say I really didn't think about the fact that these things, even though I connected them to my wireless network, were sitting there with services listening and had APIs that were easily communicated with, where it could get some interesting intelligence from those devices, including the things that I didn't expect that this home automation thing was going to find was all of my networking switches, right? So it did SNMP scans, it found switches, right? It found wireless devices, access points, things like that, and would query information from them. And you're like, what good would that be for a home automation process? And as it turns out, I think that's one of the coolest features is it will monitor the ARP cache on my devices, and then you can tell it which particular MAC addresses you're interested in. So the MAC address that's associated with my phone, if it's in the house, if that MAC address is in the CAM table on my switch, then it says, oh, Mark is home, right? If that MAC address is not in the CAM table, then Mark is not home. And I can have automations that are tied around those conditions. So we have there's a different MAC address for every person in my house, right? I've got that associated with a name, so I can easily automate things that are happening there. So the networking switches, I really wasn't thinking about it finding that. Finding the iTunes libraries that people are running on their machines in the house. And it then takes that media and allows you to integrate that media into your home automations that's being displayed. All of the televisions in my house, right, it found all of those. And every one of the televisions in my house had a Google Chromecast service or other type of service that I could have where, you want to show everybody in the house this awesome new YouTube video of cats, licking each other. I don't know. So you want to go and you broadcast this to your television. So by default, all of our televisions have this Google Chromecast service that's just sitting there. Well, Home Assistant found all those, and it exposes that service to the scripts internally where you can just easily, with one function call out to those things. My Blu-ray player, DVD players, Blu-ray players, they were all found and integrated into the system. Also, it found my my Logitech Harmony remote control, which you could use to turn on the televisions, stereos, and by extension, I can control everything that's in my house that the remote control can control, because from Home Assistant with Python scripts, I can send press any button on the remote control that I want to. So I can turn on stereos, I can turn on other things that are not even Internet of Things connected and control them from within Home Assistant. This is one I really didn't think about. My sleep number beds, right? So it found the sleep number beds, and it's monitoring sleep number beds. And I've got scripts tied to activate and do things as to whether or not we're in bed. So using the presence information, right? So using MAC addresses that are in CAM tables. My home knows when I'm home, when my children are home, when my wife is home. And if we're all home and sleep number beds indicate that we're all in bed, well, then a script runs to make sure all the lights are turned out, make sure all the doors are locked, turn on the security system, or turn on the alarm for the house and things like that. So all of those things can be integrated into Home Assistant. Perhaps the best feature of Home Assistant is all of the integrations, is what they call it, or custom components that it talks to. And this is just a broad category. So when you talk to alarm systems are like the things that you can turn on alarm monitoring for your house. I can't even think of a single product name at the moment, but secure home, things like that, right? Things that have motion sensors, all of those things, you can integrate those into Home Assistant. Binary sensors, these are just things that you can put into web pages and little switches you can have around your house to activate things. It can read from your calendars, so you can tie it into Google Calendar, so when you have events coming up, then you can have automated processes turn on your system. It talks to 12 different types of cars, right? When those are in the garage, it will talk to those cars, figure out, oh, it's time for maintenance. Let's go ahead and run this script. Let's see. The presence detection, there's all kinds of different presence detection where it figures out which people are in the house. And of course, it's got light switches and all of the things we would expect. Cameras, doorbells, water heaters, and other things that you have inside your house. Here's a look at some of the components that you get within Home Assistant. So everything you see here, I didn't do any coding, right? I just ran one Python script to get this thing to come in. For my thermostats, I did have to give it some logon information. So I had to tell it, here's the username and the password. Because if the Internet of Things device only has a web page that you can interface with, if there's no way for you to do it locally on your system, then well, you can provide a login to the web page, and the Home Assistant will go out and do that for you. I've got some things like I've got morning automations, right? So I've got one switch I can throw here to turn on my morning automations, and then at 6 a.m. every morning, it will start out with the lights being off, and it'll turn them up to like a blue hue at 1%, and then it'll do a simulated sunrise so that if it's wintertime, I'll make sure that the sun comes up in my house at 6 o'clock every day, so that I'm just waking up naturally with things, and it'll also turn on the radio and things like that. Okay. Other things it does, it has. So it is open source, so you can remove all the scary features that you don't like as information security system. So when I found that it could integrate in with my security system, I'm like, I am not putting my house security system right on this thing. If somebody can disable my security system, somebody can unlock my doors to my house from a web page as a penetration tester, I would love to come across something where, physical access, yeah, I can just go in and open your doors. I can turn off your security system and come in remotely. So, but it's open source. And you can just go in and remove those. And don't worry about it if you don't know how to code in Python. In my experience, people who don't know how to code in Python are very good at disabling functional code inside of those programs, right? So you can just go in and just delete things, comment them out, break them, however you want to do it. It does also have this cloud service that I mentioned, and it's got extensive logging of everything that it does and all of the state changes. So here at the bottom, you see a couple of graphs here. This is occupancy of my living room upstairs. So anytime there's a green line there, somebody was in my living room. If there's a red line, nobody was in the living room. You've got the presence of individuals in my family that are being tracked down here. If they're blue, they were home. Orange or purple, they were not home. Right? So it's got all kinds of logging and nice graphs that it'll show you to integrate these things. Now, even though it comes with all of these hundreds and hundreds of components that you can integrate in, it also has the ability for you to create your own components. So I have this weird speaker system in my house where you can do intercoms, like you can turn on speakers in the house. You can play radio in individual rooms, and but it's like 1970s technology. It does have a horribly flawed and immensely attackable web interface that I've thought about doing a talk on a couple of times, but never have come around to, because it's just it's a web page that's written in bash scripts. Okay. Yeah. So, but it's a web page, so I can integrate into that thing and I can do some automations. And with Home Assistant, it makes it pretty easy for you to build custom components. So in here, it did not have anything for my intercom system, but you can see here I'm doing a word count. Look at the number of lines in this thing called mediaplayer.py. There's 200 lines of code in that program, and of those 200 lines, I maybe had to write 100 of them. The rest of them were all templated where I just downloaded the stuff. So it's very easy to integrate components, anything that you have in your house that's electronic that you can communicate with across a network. You can probably integrate that in a few lines of code. So now, all right, I've gone whole hog. Everything in the house, right, that is on my wireless network can now be integrated into Home Assistant. Right? So now I want to start to tie these things together into some type of a game, some type of fun. Well, one of the easiest things you can do is you can add switches to the Home Assistant web interface. So here's the web interface for Home Assistant, and you've got all of the configuration is done in YAML, right? Yet another markup language. So you go into this YAML configuration file, and this is where you can create switches. So here I create something called Automate Lights, which is just going to be a switch that's going to be named Light Automation as an initial switch of on, and I define an icon. And by adding this switch, well then somewhere over here, here's my Light Automation switch. This switch appears in the web interface. And now I can use that switch to trigger events that happen inside my house. One of the really nice things about Home Assistant is that it acts like a Philips Hue, a light emulator. So if you ever had these Philips Hue light bulbs, right, you buy a little hub and you put this thing in your house, and it's the thing that listens on the network and talks to the Philips APIs and the Philips applications that you run on your system. Also, if you have Philips integrated in with Alexa, right, it's the thing that Alexa finds when it does a discovery scan on your internal network. Well, because Home Assistant acts like it's a Philips Hue hub, Alexa finds it. And then every switch that I've got inside of Home Assistant is now controllable through Alexa, where I can say, Alexa, turn on the challenge mark sleeping. And it sees this as a light bulb in my house, and it flicks that switch, turns it from off to on. I have a switch that's called the escape game. So I say, Alexa, turn on the escape game, and it flips that switch inside the web interface. Okay? Now at this point, right, and this is still zero coding, right? All I've done is added those 3 lines of YAML to Home Assistant. Everything else was out of the box. It just does it. Okay, that's not actually true. I did have to enable the Philips Hue emulation service in the configuration, because that's not on by default. But there's no configuration to it. You just say turn that thing on. Okay? So now I can, with my voice, flip switches on a web page, but they don't do anything other than flip the switch. So at that point, you can start to add automations to your home. Now the automations can be configured through a web interface, and these are no-code automations. So I'm going to zoom into the different components because I know you can't see those things on that screen. So, all automations are made up of a trigger, a condition, and an action, right? So the trigger is like an event that occurred inside of the web page. It says a switch was thrown, something changed from this state to this state, a timer is being activated, something like that is a trigger. Then the conditions are, I only want you to take the action in this case, and then the action is what you want to do. So here's one of my triggers. In my downstairs thermostat, which recognizes occupancy. So, your thermostats, they want to optimize the temperature, and if no one's home, they'll turn down the temperature. I can get the readings from that sensor through Home Assistant. So it says, if someone is in my downstairs, based upon the thermostat, right, if that state changes from unoccupied to occupied, then this trigger is thrown. I add conditions to that say, okay, I only want the action to run if the device tracker for Mark says that he is home. So if Mark is home, and if it's between sunset and sunrise, right, and it does this based upon, it will do a lookup of where you are based upon some HTML5. And so based upon your latitude and longitude and weather service information, it figures out what the sunrise is and sunset are for that day. So if I'm home and I walk into the bedroom, then it'll run this service. So it'll call the service called the Media Extractor, where I tell it to play on this television inside my house this YouTube video, which is in an MP4 format. And then if the television is turned off, it automatically turns on. If the television is tuned to some other station, right, it stops and it moves over to the Google Cast and it begins playing this television station. And I have had so much fun with this little thing. So again, it's all in Python code, right? So you can take the Google Cast function, and this is also available as a function call inside of Python, right? So I can take those modules, I can put them into a small executable that just sits there and waits till a given date and time, right? And then at a given date and time begins playing this video, right? So I had at my house, right, I had this program that was running that was waiting till a specific date, a specific time, and at that specific date and specific time, it would go out to YouTube, and I found some video from like The Walking Dead, right, that starts out with, "We interrupt your normally scheduled program to bring you this very important news, right, about zombies are rising from the dead and eating human beings in cities." And I ran this at my house, and then I also ran it at my mom and dad's house because, right? And so, right, my theory was, all right, if my mom and dad see this, they might call our house and then, oh yeah, we also saw the same announcement on our television that zombies are rising from the dead. But, yeah, my wife made me delete it from my parents' house before we leave, so I didn't get to test it there. We only got to use it at our house, okay? But it works, right? It's a cool little thing, and Google Chromecast is just enabled, and it just finds it out of the box, okay? I can also have it run other scripts. So here I'm having it call a Python script called escape welcome, which runs the welcome script to Python. In addition to configuring this through the web interface, you can also just configure it through YAML configurations. So here I have the script called good night, right? So this is my good night script that says, all right, if I have the binary sensor of the sleep number, says that we're on, so we're in bed, right? And if all devices are home, and the condition is it's after 9 o'clock, then turn off all the lights, turn on the alarm panel in the house, okay? So that's my good night script. This is my great night script, right? If we're in bed and the kids are not home, then turn the lights to 50% and then say, Alexa, play romantic playlist in the bedroom, okay? This does not work as well as you would like it to. All right. So now I can say, Alexa, turn on the escape game, and she flips the switch. Then, with no code, automated scripts take over from there, and everything I'm about to show you happens automatically. And I haven't written any code to do this, okay? All right, when I press play here, what you're going to see is all of the lights in the entire house are going to be turned off, except for this one light here over the television. This one's going to turn to blue. Then you're going to see that the front door in my house is going to lock. Then it's going to come back over and it's going to play a video. And this video is the introduction to the escape game, right? So this is the welcome that tells everybody how to play the escape game, okay? Now, before I play this game, or before I play this video, let me just say that if you're building an escape room in your house, you have no chance whatsoever of convincing people that you are not a nerd, okay? So you might as well own it, right? So, all right, here goes the video. All right, let's try this one more time here with audio on, maybe. Is the audio coming through the HDMI? Okay. All right, we'll try this one more time here. It's a big fat nothing. HDMI, speakers, Realtek, 100%. All right, here we go. Alexa, turn on the escape game. Welcome, candidate. So, you want to become a hacker? Well, over the next 45 minutes, I will present you with a series of challenges. If you complete them all, then you can become my new hacker apprentice. Your first challenge is to find your first clue. And it goes on from there. Okay? All right, so then we get into the escape game. Now, from there, you got to start writing some code to do some automations. You'll see this thing in Home Assistant called Python scripts. And let me just save you some time. It's a huge disappointment, right? Within the Python scripts, you can't import anything inside the Python scripts. So if you try to do Python script automations, all you can do is write a Python script that does the same thing that the YAML configuration does. So the Python scripts were a huge disappointment. But they got this thing called the App Daemon, right? And the App Daemon is another program that runs, and it lets you have full control over the entire process. You can write full-on Python programs that you can import requests. You can import whatever you want and write programs to automate things. And they provide a structure that lets you interact with those systems to make it very easy. So here's the beginning of my escape game written in the App Daemon process, right? So I have an initializer that looks for the input boolean of the escape game. If the switch is being turned from off, the old state is off and the new state is on, then it runs this thing called self.startGame. Here within self.startGame, which is right here next, it logs that the game has started. It records the start time because they only have 45 minutes. Right? And then it turns the escape game switch that I just turned on with my voice back to off. And then it starts checking the states of the other switches that I've got defined in there. Is challenge 1 turned on? Is challenge 2 turned on? And if challenge 1 is turned on, then it runs a function called challenge 1. And then it starts going through the code. So what kind of challenges do I put in my escape game? Well, there's a series of these things. So I do have integrated into rooms in my house puzzles. So I would hide a puzzle in the house. I have these ammo boxes that have got combination locks on them. So just like you'd have in a traditional escape game, you got to figure out the combinations that are on those things with the puzzles. But I also have the ability to integrate these IoT things. So the video might send you to find a puzzle. Once you solve the puzzle will have you interact with Internet of Things devices within the house, which will have you solve a puzzle. Once that puzzle is solved, that triggers some other thing that gives you that gives another video or some announcement that tells you to go someplace else. And then you got other puzzles that have combination locks. which lead to other triggers of Internet of Things and so forth and so on, and all these things are integrated in together. So here's some of my puzzles, right? So the whole team is integrated around the Hacker's Apprentice because, well, hacking is what I know and wanted to make it fun for people. So hackers are masters of technology. So one of the puzzles says, all right, excellent job. You show promise, my young apprentice. A hacker must be able to control computers using only their voice. So if you look up, right, I've got coffers in my ceilings with these light switches, right, and they have to figure out that they got to recreate this pattern of X's being off, O being on, and then turning this one light to red. And once they've done that, they've then triggered that. Then the device that's monitoring all of these different states then says, okay, you've satisfied that, and it'll play another video to tell them to go on to the next thing. And this is the code to do that. Okay? So here's my light patterns challenge. Right? It comes in. It has all of these get states where it looks for the current state of my lights. So is the living room center light on? Is the living room top light on? Is the living room right off? Is this one off? Is the RGB color for the living room center, is it red? Okay, so I've got all these different variables that I set, and then if all of them are true, then this return or lights right function, which says whether or not the lights are right, would return true. So while the lights are not right, I just log the lights are not right yet. I sleep 2 seconds, and I continuously wait in this loop until they get all of the switches correct. Once it's correct, it moves on, and it comes down here to call a service that says, all right, now on my, I want you to call the Play Media service and play on my Sony television this MP4 video, which gives them the next clue. Okay? So games, challenges like this are integrated throughout the thing. Now, what my house ends up looking like with a bunch of non-technical people who are yelling at Alexa, don't know how to use Alexa, this video here pretty much is an example of what my life is like as people are going through this escape room. And then the frustration and builds and things like that. So another one of my challenges is, hey, hackers are masters at deception, right? So I need you to cause a distraction. I've got cameras all around the house, on the outside of the house. So in order to cause a distraction, I tell the game players that they have to go into my backyard. I set the motion sensors on my cameras to low, and they have to have a dance party in the backyard that's big enough to set off the motion sensors in the cameras. And this is what that code looks like, right? So challenging, waiting for the dancers, right? I log that they've successfully finished the last challenge. I play Billy Joel Under Pressure everywhere. So all of the speakers in the house come on. And then Billy Joel Under Pressure begins playing. I record the current number of alerts on my camera. And then while the start number is equal to the current count, I get the count, and I just sit here in this loop. Once they have triggered an alert on the cameras, then it'll drop out of this while loop. It'll come down here, and it'll log dancing detected, and then it'll make an announcement through my house that says, warning, bad dancing was detected, and then it says, proceed to the living room for your next clue. Okay? I also have these Bluetooth devices. I thought these were really cool. Flick makes these. They're about $30 each. But it's a Bluetooth button, right? And you can have this Bluetooth button do just about anything you want it to. I brought this with me. I only brought one of them, but this one currently does this. So I can push a button and I can make a fart sound. Now it's not childish and immature if Bluetooth is involved. Okay. So in this case, I've got a bunch of these buttons, and we'll start out with green and and a yellow one, and they'll say, hey, Alexa, start Simon Says. And they'll start playing Simon Says, and they'll be able to go so far with the blue and the yellow, and then they'll find out, oh, it blinks blue, and they're like, but I don't have a blue button. Right? So then they'll have to figure out that they'll have to proceed further in the puzzle. So you can kind of use this as an anchor puzzle to so that people know, all right, the big puzzle that I have to solve is I have to find all of the Bluetooth buttons. And once I've accumulated all of the Bluetooth buttons, then I'll be able to go back to my Alexa, my Simon Says challenge to continue to move through puzzle. Okay? I also have some actual hacking in the system. And this was probably the most emotionally mixed challenge of them all. Right, so I have a video that plays that tells them to go to a specific IP address in my host, to a web page in my house, where it says /number of ghosts equals 6. And when they go there, they find a Mrs. Pac-Man that runs on this web page with 6 ghosts. Right, and the challenge on the screen says, you must be an excellent gamer or an amateur hacker to finish this challenge. And so many information security professionals have come to my house, and maybe they just get excited about playing Miss Pac-Man again. I don't know, right? But we'll play Miss Pac-Man over and over and over again. Now, how would you do this? Num ghost equals 0, right? So set num ghost equals 0, and then you do it. Now, the other thing that's interesting about the challenge is it never actually gives indication that it's done, right? So you could actually still play this forever. What happens is once the score reaches a combination that unlocks a box, you just stop scoring points, and the score stays the same. So I'll have people that won't notice that, which also makes that 45 minutes as time is ticking by go even longer. One of the other challenges I got in there is doing some open source intelligence. So I just tell them, this is so easy to, right? Again, no code for this one. I just tell them, all right, there's a switch in my house, and the name of the switch is my high school's mascot and my wife's record-breaking track time from 1988. So they have to go out on the internet and do some open source intelligence gathering and figure out that they what those 2 values are, and then say turn on whatever the mascot name is and whatever the time is. And once they get the name correct, then it flips the switch, and then the puzzle moves on. Again, no code for that one. But what I found is that everything in my house is now, I see combinations everywhere, right? As I look at thermostats, and I see, oh, 72 degrees. I can have a challenge where I have them set the temperature to 98 degrees in the upstairs, right? Which you do have to remember to set it back to a normal temperature. The sleep numbers, right? You can change those. If I can communicate combinations to ammo boxes by changing the channel using the Harmony remote to set to choose a channel number, which relates to a combination, things like that. So I'm just seeing numbers or combinations everywhere as I build this thing out. So a couple of lessons learned. It is important to remember that it's still your house, okay? And you still live there, and so does your family members. So some challenges that my wife has made me get rid of. Having challenges where people have to lay in your beds in order to trigger events does not tend to go over well. Also, if you're going to have things like have people dancing outside, then if there's a possibility it's going to be muddy and people are going to drag things into the house and ruin carpets. So it's important to have those switches where you can turn off certain challenges for and swap them out with others in the case of rain and things like that. So I actually could tie that into the Internet of Things weather device, right? But it's just a manual switch, right? So I've got like several challenges where I'll turn different ones off and on so that if somebody's come over or I have somebody that's pretty technology savvy, I might swap in a harder challenge just to make it fun for them. All right, so what do you need to do this? Well, some Python's coding skills would be helpful, all right? If you don't have any of those, I encourage you to check out SANS 573, Automating Information Security with Python. You need Home Assistant, right, which is a free tool that's out there. And when you scan it, don't be surprised about the amount of IoT that you already have in your house that you can probably do some cool stuff with. Okay? If you want to copy some of the source code for this, I'm happy to share it with you. Send me something on Twitter. If you have any questions, I have 4 minutes. Yes? Can I explain why play romantic music doesn't work? No, I cannot. Is the dance party recorded? Some of the dance parties have been recorded just so that they could see themselves. But yes, so that has happened once or twice. Other questions? So what kind of feedback have I gotten? So it's evolved over time, right? So the first time I did it, it was just a series of puzzles, and somebody said, you really need to have a theme, something that ties it together. And so that's the Hacker's Apprentice theme, right? And everybody seems to enjoy the videos of me making a fool of myself in my black hoodie as much as you guys seem to when that came up. So tying it together with a theme was some of the feedback. You also have people who don't like Billy Joel, right? But you know what? They're wrong. Okay? Yes? So any conflicts, if you already have other things like smart things and things like that? No, because when you, so I do have smart things running and a couple other things, and when I make a change in those other software, it picks it up, it recognizes the state of change, and it updates the state in Home Assistant to make that there. Yeah. Yep. Yes? Yep. Yeah, so does it conflict with, if you already have an existing Hue bridge and you run a Hue bridge emulator, does that cause any problems? No, you can have multiple Hue bridges in your house. So my Alexa device scans, finds the lights that are attached to Home Assistant on that, and it also finds the Hue lights there. I do have to go into, which means all of my lights would appear twice inside of Alexa. I have to go into Alexa and say, delete these. You also have in your configuration where you can do things like, here's the emulation configuration. So you can see that in my emulation configuration, I don't have switches as an exposed domain here, which means it's not going to automatically, or excuse me, lights. I don't have lights, so the Philips Hue emulator doesn't expose lights that are behind it as lights to Alexa, so I don't have to go through and delete them anymore. Okay. There was another question here. Yeah, what am I using for presence detection? I'm just using the MAC address, which can run into problems because your phone will go to sleep, right? And then that MAC address will time out. There's better ways to do it where you can actually, if you put that Home Assistant web client on there, then that will keep it up to date. You can also, if it will subscribe to like friends and family if everybody's got iPhones, then it can tie into the friends and family APIs and actually know not just whether or not they're in the house, but where they physically are. So you can have it run scripts when people are approaching your house and things like that. Presence detection is one of its strongest points. It's got a lot of different ways that you can do that. I'm just keeping it simple and going with MAC addresses. Okay? And I think, do I have time for one more question? Okay? One more. No more? One more. What you got? Yeah, so TP-Link is specifically, it's using TP-Link, right? There is no way to talk to those smart home, the cheap Chinese light bulbs, right? That you can get for like $3 that you can turn off and on. There's no way to control them locally. They have to be attached to the internet, right? Just not the bulbs.